There are moments in history when silence is no longer an option, when the quiet of our everyday lives is shattered by the cries of those cast aside, and in that moment we are called to choose. Will we remain distant, disengaged, or will we stand with hearts unflinching for the vulnerable? This is not about politics. It is about humanity. It is about mothers clutching their children in the dark, fathers searching for their sons in the dust. It is about knowing deep somewhere down that human suffering anywhere diminishes all of us. Each of us has felt unease when faced with the pain of others. That unease asks a question: what will you do? It is easy to feel small in the face of such vast need. But moral courage is not born from grand gestures. It grows in the quiet decision to act when you could have looked away. There are stories that defy comprehension until you let them in. A child's laughter snuffed out before it fully blossomed. A school reduced to rubble. Parents who wander in search of safety only to find their homes no more. These are not statistics. These are people, living, breathing, yearning for mercy. Strength is not always loud. It does not always roar. Sometimes it is the softest voice, resolute, saying, "I will not turn away." Even when worn thin by sorrow, that voice can carry farther than the thunder of armies. It is in that calm conviction where real power lies. But one voice is a candle in the dark, but many candles can ignite the night. When we act, when we speak, when we gather aid, when we demand attention, we become a force that even the most entrenched powers cannot ignore. So I ask you to imagine a day, not distant, not impossible, when these children sleep safely, when parents rebuild homes without fear, when medicine flows and food is plentiful. That is not a fantasy, but a possible tomorrow if we refuse to accept anything less. Let us stand not for egos, not for politics, but for humanity. Let us stand with our quiet courage, our steady resolve, our unwavering empathy. For in that stand we write a different story, one that says hearts can heal, that hope can prevail, that even in the darkest of times, light endures. There are times when the world drifts into a haze of confusion, when voices argue endlessly over politics, borders, and power. But in those moments, there is a truth so simple that it cuts through all the noise. Suffering is suffering. Injustice is injustice. To see children frightened, to see families torn apart, to see lives shattered in the dust and rubble, this does not require analysis or debate. It requires recognition. It requires the courage to call it what it is, without hesitation, without excuse. Moral clarity is not about choosing sides in a conflict of governments or ideologies. It is about standing with humanity when humanity is under siege. It is often tempting to look away, to soften the reality, to wrap it in distance so it does not disturb us too deeply. But to do so is to betray our own conscience. We know instinctively that when the vulnerable cry out, the measure of who we are is revealed in how we respond. A mother holding her child in fear, a father searching for food to keep his family alive, an old man carrying the weight of loss in his eyes. These are not abstractions, things. They are reminders of our shared human bond, and that bond demands that we not remain silent. History has shown us again and again that injustice thrives when good people rationalize it away. Words like complicated and distant are often shields for inaction. But moral clarity is the refusal to hide behind complexity when the truth is evident. The truth is that innocent lives are being extinguished. that dignity is being stripped away, that human beings are being treated as expendable. And when we acknowledge that truth, the path before us becomes clear. We must stand against it in whatever way we can. This clarity does not require hatred, nor does it require violence. It requires resolve. It requires the strength to name cruelty for what it is and to lend our voices to those who have been silenced. It is the quiet conviction that the suffering of one child matters as much as the suffering of our own. And it is the recognition that if we accept injustice in one place, we open the door for it everywhere. Moral clarity is not a luxury for the brave few. It is a duty for all of us. It is the compass that ensures our humanity does not falter, even when the world around us loses its way. To stand for what is right is not always easy, but it is always necessary. In that stand, we affirm not only the worth of others, but the very essence of who we are. There comes a moment when the world presses in on us with images and stories that cannot be ignored. We might change the channel, scroll past the headline, or distract ourselves with the rhythm of ordinary life, but deep inside, something lingers, a quiet unease, a voice that whispers, "What if that were me? What if that were my family?" That voice is not there to torment us. It is there to guide us. It is the voice of conscience, and it calls each of us to account. We often tell ourselves that the world's suffering is too vast, that one person's choices are too small to matter, and yet history is built on the moments when ordinary men and women refuse to ignore that voice within. One act of compassion, one refusal to stay silent, one step taken when it would have been easier to stand still. These have been the sparks that lit the great fires of change. Conscience does not demand that we solve every problem, but it does demand that we do not look away. It is easy to be numbed by repetition. Numbers of the dead and displaced become statistics, stripped of their humanity. But conscience strips away the numbers and reminds us that behind every figure is a life, a child with a favorite toy, a mother with a dream for her son, an old man who once laughed in the company of friends. When we let these truths in, the voice inside us grows stronger, asking not just, "What do you see?" but "What will you do?" And what we do need not always be grand. It can be as simple as bearing witness, as speaking truth in the face of denial, as giving time, resources, or presence to ease another's burden. Conscience rarely asks us for comfort. It asks us for courage. It asks us to risk being misunderstood, to stand apart if necessary, to let our compassion be louder than our fear. Each of us must decide whether to answer that call. We can choose indifference, or we can choose to act, however modestly, in the service of what is right. When we choose the latter, we discover something powerful, that our small acts are not isolated. They join with countless others, forming a chorus that cannot be silenced. In that chorus, conscience is transformed from a whisper into a force that can move the world. When we strip away the flags, the languages, the borders, and the arguments of history, what remains is something we all understand: the heartbeat of a child, the embrace of a parent, the longing for safety, the desire for dignity. These are not possessions of one people or another. They are the threads that weave us together as human beings. Empathy is the recognition that what we cherish in our own lives is equally sacred in the lives of others, no matter where they are born or how different they may seem from us on the surface. Right? It is easy to see suffering from a distance and let it blur into abstraction. The world bombards us with images and numbers until they lose their weight, until tragedy becomes a headline scrolling by. But empathy demands that we stop, that we allow ourselves to feel, that we imagine the trembling hands of a child reaching for safety, the tear-stained face of a mother whispering promises she is no longer sure she can keep, the hollow silence of families who have lost everything but grief. When we allow those images to move from the screen into our hearts, we are no longer spectators. We are participants in their humanity. Shared humanity means that their pain is not foreign, it is familiar. We may not share their language, but we know the cry of a child in the night. We may not know their streets, but we know the ache of hunger, the warmth of love, the fear of loss. Empathy is not weakness, it is strength. It takes courage to let the suffering of another penetrate your soul, to resist the temptation to close your eyes. But it is in that courage where our greatest humanity is revealed. And empathy is not just a feeling, it is a bridge. It connects us to people we may never meet, reminding us that the boundary between them and us is an illusion. Their stories are not separate from ours. They are part of the same human story, a story that demands we protect and honor life wherever it is threatened. To feel their suffering is not enough. We must let that feeling move us to action so that their voices are heard, their dignity is defended, and their hope is restored. When we embrace empathy through shared humanity, we affirm that there is no life too distant, no suffering too foreign to be ignored. In doing so, we remind ourselves and the world that compassion is not bound by geography or politics. It is the universal language of the human heart, and it is in that language that we must choose to speak. Strength is often mistaken for the loudest voice, the clenched fist, the thunder of force imposed upon others. But true strength is not found in noise or in spectacle. It lives in the quiet resolve of a heart that refuses to bend in the face of injustice. It is the kind of strength that does not need to announce itself because it is unwavering. It stands firm when the ground shakes, steady when storms rage, constant when the world demands surrender. Quiet strength is a fire that burns inward, not to consume but to endure. It is the steady breath in the chaos, the unbroken gaze that refuses to turn away, the simple word spoken with calm conviction, enough. It is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite fear. And often it is the most unassuming people who carry it. A teacher shielding her students, a father holding his family together with nothing but will, a stranger who gives what little he has to ease the burden of another. These acts may never make headlines, but they are the backbone of human resilience. In a world that too often glorifies power as domination, quiet strength subverts that idea. It shows that true power is not in breaking others, but in refusing to be broken by cruelty. It is in the decision to keep standing again and again, even when the weight of despair threatens to crush. This resolve cannot be bought, nor can it be imposed. It is born from conscience, nurtured by empathy, and sustained by the knowledge that some truths are worth more than comfort, more than safety, even more than life itself. The beauty of quiet strength is that it spreads. One act of courage sparks another. One voice of calm defiance gives permission for others to rise. The world may not see it immediately, but it is this kind of strength that changes the course of history. Not the violent shout, but the patient stand. Not the roar of fear, but the whisper of conviction. There will always be those who believe that might makes right, but quiet strength proves them wrong. It does not demand recognition. It does not seek glory, and yet it outlasts empires. When cruelty has burned itself out and noise has faded into silence, quiet strength remains, unyielding, enduring, unbroken. And it is from that resolve that hope is reborn. One voice in the dark may seem fragile, a flicker against the weight of shadows, but voices are not meant to stand alone. When they gather, when they rise together, they become something unstoppable. What one person cannot carry, 1,000 hands can lift. What one heart cannot heal, 1,000 hearts can mend. Collective action is the force that transforms compassion into change and silence into movement. It begins with a simple truth. No act is too small when it joins with others. A word spoken in defense of justice, a coin given to sustain a family, a march walked with steady steps, a message shared across oceans. Each action by itself may seem insignificant, but woven together, they create momentum. No wall can withstand. Alone, we can be dismissed. Together, we demand to be heard. The powerful rely on our isolation. They count on us to believe our efforts are meaningless, that the problems are too large, that the suffering of others is beyond our reach. But history has proven otherwise. Every great tide of justice, every end to oppression, every victory for freedom, every moment when dignity was restored, was made possible not by a single leader, but by countless people who refused to look away. The many gave their voices, their time, their courage, and in doing so, they became greater than the sum of their parts. There is strength and solidarity that no weapon can break. When we choose to link arms across boundaries of culture, faith, and nation, we declare that humanity itself is indivisible, that the pain of one is not theirs alone to bear, but ours to confront together. Collective action is the living proof that empathy has power, that compassion has weight, and that justice is not the dream of a few, but the demand of many. The world changes not when one person shouts, but when millions echo the same truth. Each of us has a role to play, small perhaps, but essential. For every voice matters, every act counts. Every step forward brings us closer to the day when justice is not promised, but lived. Alone we can light a candle. Together we can set the night ablaze. Hope is not the denial of suffering, nor is it the naive belief that pain will simply vanish if we wish hard enough. Hope is the decision to see beyond the rubble, beyond the fear, beyond the cruelty of the present moment, and to imagine what must come after. It is the refusal to let despair have the final word. In the darkest of nights, hope is the spark that refuses to be extinguished, no matter how relentless the wind. To believe in hope is to believe in people. It is to believe that a child who has only known fear can one day laugh without looking over their shoulder. It is to believe that families now scattered and broken can return to rebuild their homes and plant their lives in peace. It is to believe that the earth now scarred by violence can once again bear the sound of music, of prayer, of everyday life lived without terror. Hope demands imagination, but it also demands courage. For to hope is to resist, and to resist is to insist that the world can and must be better than it is. Hope is not passive. It is not waiting for miracles to arrive. It is the steady work of hands that rebuild, the quiet determination of voices that refuse silence, the persistence of those who plant seeds knowing they may never sit in the shade of the tree. It is the vision of a tomorrow shaped by our actions today. To hold hope is to carry responsibility, not only to dream, but to act in ways that make that dream possible. And this vision of hope is not reserved for the few. It belongs to all who dare to believe that even in the ruins of hatred, compassion can rise, that even in the aftermath of war, reconciliation can take root, that even when darkness seems endless, the dawn is already approaching. Hope is the thread that binds generations, carrying with it the promise that suffering does not define us, and that the light of human dignity cannot be permanently dimmed. The path is long, the cost is heavy, but hope assures us that the story is not finished. It tells us that children will one day sleep without fear, that families will one day rebuild without loss, that peace is not a fantasy but a possibility we have the power to create. And in choosing to believe in that vision, we ensure that despair is not the last chapter. The light endures because we refuse to let it die. So now we arrive at the end, and yet this is not an end at all. What has been spoken here is not meant to linger only in words, but to live in what we choose to do next. We have looked into the face of injustice, we've felt the weight of conscience, we've opened our hearts to the humanity we share, we have seen the power of quiet strength, and we have heard the call that only together can we move the world. And above all, we have held on to a vision of hope that reaches beyond the ruins of today into the promise of tomorrow. The question that remains is simple, though never easy. Will we carry this with us, or will we leave it behind? Each of us must decide whether to step back into silence or to rise with resolve. The choice is ours, and it will define not only how history remembers us, but how we remember ourselves. Let us choose to stand, even when standing is difficult. Let us choose to act, even when action seems small. Let us choose to believe, even when belief is tested. For if enough of us answer this call, then light will break through the darkness, and justice will not be a dream whispered in the night, but a reality lived in the day. And if when that day comes, when the world begins to heal, we will know that it was because people refused to turn away. We will know it was because, in the face of despair, ordinary hearts chose courage, and we will know it was because hope endured, carried not by one, but by all.